once we get that right, which is for me the most important thing, that they have, first of all, respect. The second one is commitment. The third one, passion. Those three ingredients are non-negotiable.
Hello and welcome into the Non-Negotiables podcast. Recording this on Thursday morning after Bayern Munich were beaten 1-0 by Lazio last night in the first leg of the round of 16s in the Champions League. It's an interesting result. I don't know that it means that much in the long run, because I think Bayern will probably win in the second leg and it'll all be done and dusted. But they're having a bad run at the minute. They obviously got thumped by Granit Xhaka a couple of weeks ago. They've gone out of the German Cup. They've lost in the German Charity Shield. Signing Harry Kane has obviously had an effect, just not the one they wanted. And signing Eric Dyer has turned out exactly like everyone thought it would probably turn out. Thomas Tuchel's days there, I think, are numbered. I don't think you can survive the way that they've been playing. But the interesting part for me, it's not really what goes on there, because I don't give a stuff about the Bundesliga, but they were seen by a lot of people as one of the favourites for the Champions League. So when the Champions League opened, Manchester City were favourites, then Bayern and Real Madrid, and then us. My opinion, we're the second best team in it, maybe the best team if we can get past Manchester City, but until we do get past Manchester City, they are the best team in the world. But I've always thought that we were better than Bayern anyway, and it would be interesting if they were to crash out at this point, what that would do to the Champions League odds. We obviously go to Porto next week. It's going to be a tough game. We're in a series of 3 away games in a row. West Ham, that went very well. We got Burnley on the weekend, and then we go away to Porto as well. But I just thought mention that with Bayern Munich. PSG won 2-0. They're going to go through comfortably. Manchester City won obviously on Tuesday night, and they're going to go through comfortably. But seeing one of the big boys struggle is always eye-opening, I think. Moving on from that, something else that came out of the Champions League coverage this week was Rio Ferdinand on TNT Sports. Talking about whether Bukayo Saka is world-class, which come off of a conversation where he said Phil Foden was world-class. Now, there's a few things to bear in mind when having this conversation. Firstly, it's Rio Ferdinand. Now, Manchester United players from that era have a natural, intense dislike of Arsenal, and I fully understand it, and I have no issue with it. The same as I don't have any issue with our players from that era having an intense dislike of Manchester United. It was a fierce rivalry. It was one that went on for the best part of a decade. So, of course, there's going to be feelings towards the clubs there either way. I mean, there's no way to avoid it. The second thing is with Rio Ferdinand is very, very good at generating clicks and causing controversy. He's very, very savvy, PR-wise. He knows that if he can get Arsenal fans engaged in something, we're one of the biggest forces online. Arsenal Twitter is huge, as is well documented. So if he can get the Arsenal fans rolled up, he can get engagements, he can get clicks, and that's great for the brand of Rio Ferdinand, Rio Ferdinand's podcast, Rio Ferdinand's punditry. It's just good for Rio Ferdinand to drum this up. The last thing to remember is that, what the fuck is world class? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different interpretations of it. Me, personally, I think it's, are you one of the 10 best players in the world in your position? I've heard other people say it's top 5. Whichever way you want to ask that question about Bukayo Saka, I think the answer is yes. I certainly can't think of 5 players that I would rather pick on the right wing than Bukayo Saka. I think you can make a very good argument for Mo Salah. In fact, I think you can make an absolute inarguable argument, if you like, for Mo Salah. Until Bukayo Saka is scoring 25 to 30 goals a season, Mo Salah is the number one there, as long as he's still there. Beyond that, I really don't see who else you're going to pick in front of him. But the criteria for world class is something to keep in mind. So this is what Rio Ferdinand said. You've got to understand and respect and appreciate Phil Foden has done this where the medals were handed out. He's performed. Saka needs the opportunity to perform on that platform consistently. Now, let's break this down a little bit here. First of all, I'm not going to argue that Saka hasn't had the platform that Foden has had. Foden is playing in a team that for the last 5 years has been a lot better than Arsenal. Saka has been playing in a team that hasn't been winning stuff. Saka hasn't even been in the Champions League until this season. So there's no doubt that that is absolutely true. However, and I don't want to disparage Phil Foden because I think Phil Foden's a great little player. I think he's an excellent player. But Phil Foden last year in the Champions League made 3 starts, all in the group stages, one a dead rubber at the end. So he didn't start a single knockout game. Is that really where the medals are handed out? Did he really perform where the medals are handed out? In the league, I think he started half their league games roundabout, but he certainly wasn't what you would consider a mainstay of that team, right? Like if you're looking for the reasons Manchester City won the title last year, Phil Foden's quite a long way down that list that's headed obviously by Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne and Rodri and Ederson as well. So he's a long way down that list. So I don't really get that part of the argument. I think that's a false narrative, basically. Saka, when he's had a chance this season, was the joint highest goal contributor in the group stages. He has been Arsenal's player of the season 2 years out of the last 3. The only year he wasn't was last season when Martin Odegaard won it and Saka was second. He's been England's player of the year the last 2 seasons. He was England's best player at a Euros and at a World Cup, where, by the way, Phil Foden was struggling to even get a game. And again, I don't want to disparage Foden here because I think Foden is a great player in his own right. I'm just pointing out that I think what Ferdinand said was completely ridiculous. Like, there's just no basis in fact. So I don't want to spend any more time on this because I think it's just, like I said, I think Ferdinand says things to say things and he says things to generate clicks. And by talking about it, we're kind of just giving him what he's looking for. And I'm not really in the business of giving Rio Ferdinand what he wants. So we'll move on from this. I just wanted to point out how ridiculous that is. And by the way, Saka's got 32 caps and 11 goals for England. And he's only just 22. So I just think it was a stupid thing to say with no basis in fact, and I wish people would pull him up on it. And instead, the arguments are going to be who's better, Foden and Saka, when the argument should really be what the hell is Rio Ferdinand talking about? Like it just that's the way it is. Moving on to the next thing, Kieran Tierney. He gave an interview to the excellent Sid Lowe. I don't know if you've all seen it or not, but let me just read you a couple of quotes from it. First one from Kieran Tierney talking about the inverted wing-back role at Arsenal. He said, "I was trying to learn that at Arsenal. You see how well it works, it's hard to question. I tried my best, learned, tried to do it in training and in games. Maybe I can be very comfortable in that position one day. I got to practice with one of the best in the world, Zinchenko. It's so natural to him, he makes it look so easy. But for me, it's probably more natural going up and down the wings." Let's be clear, there's a lot more to this than Tierney not being able to invert or not being comfortable in central midfield. Like it's a lazy, false argument that people put forward. Kieran Tierney isn't at Arsenal now and will not be going forward because he's just a little bit limited as a player. And I'm not a huge Kieran Tierney fan. Everybody knows that. I do think Kieran Tierney's a decent player. I think he'd be a good signing for a lot of clubs in the lower half of the Premier League. I think he'd be a decent mid-table left back for someone. But Kieran Tierney's ability and instincts are not right for this Arsenal team. They're just not conducive to playing for a team like us that want possession and want to create. It's just not the way it is. When Tierney gets the ball defensively, his first thought is to either lash it up the field or lash it out of play. When he's going forward and he gets it, his first thought is to smash across into the box, regardless of who's in the middle, which results 99 times out of 100 with a ball being given away. That's just the way he plays. It's just the way he is. And that's the bottom line with that. He also was asked about staying at Arsenal beyond the end of the season when his loan ends. He said, "Arsenal are amazing. They've helped me the last 4 years. Even this season, letting me come here and try this experience. They had Kivior's injury and it would have been very easy to say, no, we're going to stop it. But they were open, honest and said, no, you go for a year. I'm very grateful for that." Now, I can see why Kieran Tierney would be grateful for that. I think Sociedad are a good club. San Sebastian's a great place. I would imagine it's a fantastic place to live, to spend a year. But Arsenal wanted to sell Kieran Tierney last summer. There just wasn't a market for him. The interest that was supposed to be there from Newcastle obviously wasn't. I don't think the interest was ever there. I think it's just a case of Newcastle were newly minted. They kind of were being linked with a lot of left backs. And it was natural to basically make that link for fans. And I think journalists jumped on the back of fans linking that move. I mean, Newcastle made it pretty clear when they paid 30 million for a Chelsea reserve left back who's looks pretty average to me whenever I've seen him play. And now, by the way, he can't even get in Newcastle's matchday squads. But that's who they chose over Kieran Tierney. Tierney would obviously have commanded more wages, but I don't see that's a problem for Newcastle. The fee would probably have been similar. And they decided to go in a different direction. And there was no interest anywhere else in a permanent deal. Tierney's obviously been out for half of this season. I hear he's only a couple of weeks from coming back. So hopefully he can come back, get his fitness back, get a run of games and play well, because that's the only way we're going to basically be able to get rid of him this summer. We want a permanent move for him. I'm sure he would like a permanent move too. I don't know if Sociedad can afford his wages. I would imagine, seeing as he's missed more than half his time there, they probably aren't really pushing for it anyway. But if he can come back and play well, maybe he can drum up a market for himself and we can move on, because I think it's pretty clear that that's kind of what we need to do now. Break, move on, and let him go and continue his career somewhere else. Another story that popped up today comes from Mundo Deportivo in Spain. I'm going to use the word report very loosely here, but they are reporting that Barcelona are keeping tabs on Gabriel Martinelli. Now, if by keeping tabs on him, they mean that they're watching him on TV, then fair enough, I've got no argument with that. But Gabriel Martinelli is not going to be a transfer target for Barcelona. Like, that's just the way it is. One day, Martinelli will probably leave Arsenal. Maybe it will be to Spain. It's not going to be this summer, and it's certainly not going to be to this version of Barcelona that need to pull a lever to pay the light bill. And Mundo Deportivo are a Barcelona mouthpiece. They're a Barcelona-centric publication, so whenever they report anything, you have to take it with a whole boulder of salt, because a pinch just isn't enough to wash the taste of bullshit out your mouth after they've shoved it down your throat. So that's a non-starter. That's absolutely not going anywhere. Which brings me on to the next point. Kylian Mbappe. There's reports out there. I think Miguel Delaney was someone that reported it, that Mbappe is open to a move to Arsenal or Liverpool in the Premier League. Well, how open? I mean, is he open enough to drop down 500 grand a week? Because we are not paying him 700 grand a week or whatever it's on that he's on in Paris. Like, that's just not going to happen. So this one is pie in the sky stuff. It's never going to happen. I understand why people like the link, because obviously we're going to be looking for a forward in the summer. Mbappe is one of the best in the world. Mbappe would be an absolutely fantastic player in the Premier League and a fantastic player for Arsenal, but it's not going to happen. Like, it's just not going to happen. And the other thing is, when Arteta leaves him out of the Champions League squad and the Premier League squad and stops him from coming to the training ground, how much would we have to pay for him to go away? I joke, obviously, that's not serious. But yeah, it's not going to happen, so we can forget that. And the last bit of news for today, Carlos Cuesta is being linked with the Norwich job. Obviously, Arteta's coaching staff are doing a great job. Arteta's doing a great job. And I think as our stature in the game gets back to where it was when people actually wanted our players and wanted people from within Arsenal, this is going to happen. We're going to see more and more of this. Albert Stuyvenberg was linked with the Ajax job back in October. They're on, I think, their third manager of the season right now, another interim jobby. So I'm sure that link is going to resurface again, probably in the new year. And I think this is just something we're going to have to get used to. The coaching staff around Arteta are going to be in demand places. I mean, you might see assistant managers being linked with manager jobs somewhere. You may see coaches linked with assistant manager jobs somewhere. It's a natural career progression, and it's going to happen. Some of these coaches are going to leave. Steve McLaren and Carlos Queiroz both left Manchester United for manager jobs, as did Brian Kidd. Pep Guardiola's assistant, who I can never remember the name of, left to go to New York to manage there. So you know this is the natural order of things. As you do better, as your staff do better, they are going to be linked with other jobs. I think it's an inevitability. Let's be fair, we don't really know what a lot of these what a lot of these guys do. I mean, we put our set-piece success down to Nicolas Jova, and everything we see and hear says that's the right thing to do, but we don't actually know that that is the case. I mean, we're assuming it is because if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck. But we don't know. So I don't know how big Carlos Cuesta's influence is around the place, but him being linked with the Norwich job, I think you have to take it as a compliment, right? Like, I think it's a good thing if our staff are being wanted elsewhere, because it means that they're obviously doing a good job and being recognised for it. Well, that's your lot for today. I'll be back tomorrow where we'll look at the Burnley game in more depth, the building up to that. We've had a couple of great results, obviously, recently. The win over Liverpool, the big win at West Ham's catapulted us right back into a title race that it looked like we were out of. Those defeats, the defeats of West Ham and Fulham, really have left us no margin for error. Man City are obviously on a charge now. Liverpool have got a run of games where you have to say it looks like they're going to pick up a lot of points. So our margin for error is basically zero at this point. We're favourites on Saturday. I'm certainly confident. But like I said, we'll get into that and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So for now, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I will speak to you again tomorrow. Goodbye.